Greetings fencers, so this is the review of our Weapon Master Gauntlets by Thok. I've only had these gloves about 3 months, so this is almost like a first impressions, but I've gotten to spar in them lots of times, and I've gotten hit in the hands hundreds of times. But that does mean, in a year, I could see them differently. Opinions can change. Now, to get a short answer out of the way, if you're a saber or side sword fencer, congratulations, you finally had a glove designed for you. This is the only type of glove that I've seen that can fit in most types of side swords and sabers that is strong enough for those hits. So something's finally been designed for that. Great news. We haven't really had any good choices for weapons like this. Red dragons are finally obsolete. This does everything better than a red dragon, including being smaller. So, hooray! But this is going to be a little bit more in-depth review because obviously we do a lot of longsword, and so is it good enough for that is usually the biggest question on someone's mind. So some people think this glove is a little bit overrated, that's, it's not, it's getting a little bit too much fame than maybe it deserves. I think that comes a little bit from perhaps a misunderstanding of what this glove is. So a lot of people may have thought that this is sort of a cheap pro gauntlet, a better coning, that it's a longsword glove that can be used with other weapons, but that's really not the case. This is for other weapons and that you can use with longsword, which that is a difference. That's a big difference. And I think they managed to make that flawlessly. This does exactly what it sets out to do. Anything that they did to make it more geared toward longsword would have probably compromised it for the other weapons. So finally we have a glove that hits a gap in HEMA that we really need covered, where red dragons was sort of the only choice. I think there were some gloves in Russia that were made and stuff, but those are harder to get. And so we finally have a glove for that niche. But are they still usable with longsword? That's the big question. So first thing that would answer to that is, for our longsword, having this without the overlay, no. It's not quite good enough for our type of longsword sparring and our types of tournaments. And I know that there's many out there where it also doesn't quite meet the protection requirements of those tournaments. There are lots of tournaments where it will, lots of tournaments where it won't, and that's where you have to decide, is it good enough? However, with the overlay, it just barely meets the requirements that we would have with longsword. So in our local longsword tournament, anyone with weapon masters, they would require this for steel longsword. So we're going to go through first the protection, then the mobility, and then also the sizing and what types of weapons does it fit well in, and comparatively to other gloves as well. And then also at the end I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to use in my next steel tournament, which will probably be SoCal. So first, protection-wise, this glove is pretty protective. You can take lots of hits in lots of places, but it generally hurts. It just, wherever you're getting hit, it always hurts. I wouldn't want to stick my head on a table and continuously just get hits everywhere. That looks really painful. Like if I do that with a Spec Heavy, I can laugh and have a conversation as that's happening. Every hit you do feel, and there will be many that are painful. And especially over time, you will get bruises and places on your bones, which could have lasting effects. It's not something great to just have continuously getting hits. Also, I did take one quite kind of sucked to get because it lasted a while. I'll put a picture up. I got hit in between the fingers, so it pinched the skin in between the fingers because there is no side of the finger protection, and there's 3 different gaps for that, so that can kind of happen a lot of times. It doesn't happen very often, but if you do take a hit with the fingers, then there's not going to be any protection. I had essentially what felt like a hole in my finger for a little bit of time, so it was just a cut came in. So in between the finger protection is not great, and that's one of the reasons why the overlay is really required. There are also a couple gaps, especially by the wrist. There's about a centimeter gap here. It's stretched over time. That absolutely you will end up getting hit there if you spar enough times. You'll be an ox, a thwart will come in, you'll take a hit there with no protection. A lot of gloves have that problem. I've had the same thing happen on Spec Heavies right here, so it is sort of a problem that happens with most gloves. I do really like that it does actually have protection around the wrist. However, the protection, again, still hurts every time you get hit. You're like, ow, that hurt. But comparatively to one of its competitors, Konings have nothing. It's just a piece of leather. So it actually has a bit of protection on the wrist comparatively to a Koning. The top of the finger is also one of those concerns. When you're holding a sword, usually a cross guard will take a bit of the impact, no matter where it is. So it doesn't happen too often. But I did a little bit of sparring with sticks, where now all of a sudden every hit you're taking on the top of your hand, and it was hurting every time just with these. I was like, dang it, I was expecting these gloves to be a little bit stronger for that. There's really not much protection. There's only soft protection on the top finger and bottom finger, so maybe there'll be an overlay specifically for that at some point. But again, this overlay does for the most part protect it. That gap becomes significantly smaller, and it becomes really difficult to actually take a hit to your fingers that doesn't also hit a plastic plate. Fingertip protectors work great. I've taken lots of hits directly to the fingers. Again, they hurt, but nothing that's been serious. I never thought, oh, I gotta take my glove off to check my hand. So as you can see, pretty much everything hurts a little bit to take a hit. It is a light glove, and that's why it's not made for longsword or heavy weapons. It is made for lighter weapons, but the fact that we're having this conversation about how protective it is with a longsword, that I'm actually using it with a longsword, because I take hand safety pretty seriously. I don't wear light gloves when doing anything sparring related. There's a lot of people who spar leather gloves with side sword and saber, and I've never done that. So that a glove this small can be this protective is amazing. So that's why I'm able to just put on this, and especially for switching between synthetic longsword, Dusac, saber, messer, whatever we use in class, I'm able to just spar with my students, no problem. Doesn't really matter. With some of the more senior students, I do want to make sure if we switch to longsword or messer, I have my overlay on, because I can start getting hits to the fingers that do hurt. Comparatively to a Koning, I will say the Koning has a couple spots that take the impact a little bit better, but Konings also have a bunch of gaps in its protection, which that is where the Weapon Masters come really nice. I do feel like my hand is more turtled up and has overall better protection than a Koning. The Koning does have hard plates at some places, which these do not, which do just make it so you might sometimes not even feel a hit to a Koning glove, whereas this, you do feel it because it is that absorbing material. So these are, in general, good enough protection for doing any type of drilling in longsword, doing some slower sparring, smooth sparring, or just sparring with beginners where they don't have as much power generation. These are great, especially for synthetic longsword, because now it's getting displaced, can't hit between your fingers. It is good enough for almost most weapons that you can encounter with in HEMA, and makes mixed sparring a lot more achievable with full impact. Because before, you kind of have to just not hit them in the hand if you're doing certain types of mixed sparring. Now you can. The overlay, as I said, adds a good chunk of protection and makes it to it where it just passes what I consider safe for longsword. Pretty fast to put on. It does come off quite a lot, which even if this back part pops off, it still stays on. It's not a huge worry. It's not going to fall off at mid-tournament. However, these do have quite weak stitching, and they can break. I've already had one break, where you can see there's white stitching on it now. Before I go to a tournament, I will definitely re-sew all of them with another set of stronger thread. That way, they won't break in the middle of a tournament match. Now, mobility. This is where this glove, obviously it's great. 5-finger gloves aren't the most amazing. There's a lot. This is a common forum question: is what 5-fingered longsword gloves can I get? And the truth is, Mittens, that's what you can get. That'll be a lot better. Because 5-finger gloves don't just make you a better fencer. These are okay, and everything's fun. It's nice, especially on the pommel side, to be able to pull with individual fingers. For the top hand, doesn't really make a difference, and the thumb definitely does not have as much rotation. I can turn it, but it's not as comfortable to turn compared to sparring gloves, which I can overturn. These are definitely the best glove that I've ever had for right-handed longsword. Black Knights are also a glove getting a lot of positive reviews, and in general, if you're starting off, mitten gloves are going to be your best bet. They do not reduce your mobility. Here I can hold in a handshake grip, I can do everything I want, and get full protection that's equal on all my fingers and not have fingers get hit off different sides. With one-handed swords, it is great, again, to be able to pull with your bottom fingers individually in order to move that sword. It definitely helps with parrying and getting those lighter mullinets to counter cut into a sword. That's something that I was definitely missing a little bit when I was using my sparring gloves with Messer, and it is nice to be able to go back to that. So if we move on to different weapons, one thing that's just great about these gloves is just how small they are. So they can fit easily in most side swords, rapiers, sabers. I can even fit 2 fingers in here, which is great. If we compare the profile to Koning's, you can see 4 fingers is roughly the size of Koning's 3 fingers. That is a pretty drastic difference in your hand size. So Koning's just barely fit into a lot of saber hilts. These fit effortlessly with all fingers on the handle, especially steel sabers. These are great. However, with Koning's, I sort of have to stuff my hand in, and then I can let go and the sword just stays in the handle. So, still fits, but you can see everything's squished. I have a pointer finger sticking out to make room for the thumb. Red Dragons also just fit inside my saber. There's just enough room that it can move around in there. Koning's barely fit in my saber, in my rapier. I can stuff it in there where it's eventually usable. Red Dragons just fit, and these fit easily in my rapier. And you can just stuff 2 fingers in there. That's not quite comfortable though. But we can see, even with Red Dragons, the profile of these is still close to 3 Red Dragon fingers with all of my 4 fingers. These are mediums though, so that can change. I'm sure that will change if you have large, extra large, etc. So these are mediums. They just fit me. I'm at the large end of medium, and these were very tight at the beginning. So now they do feel better. They have broken in more. There was a reasonably long break-in period, especially comparatively to seeing a lot of reviews saying it's pretty much usable first try. My hands were pretty tired, and I caught myself just kind of fencing with hand open a little bit to give my fingers a rest, because it was pretty tight. Making a fist would push plastic plates into me, etc. Especially with sabers like this that hit really hard, that have open handles. Something like this is great because you can easily fit all your fingers on the handle, and you have that protection where if you get hit in the hands, it's not going to be a guaranteed broken finger. So overall, these are great gloves, and I think Thok succeeded in what he was trying to make. I think adding more to this glove would make it so it doesn't have the appeal for all these lighter weapons that we want to use them with. I think there definitely can be modifications, especially to those fingers, and the overlay could definitely use some modifications. But overall, this is a glove that doesn't really have any competition, I think. Red Dragons are less protective, less mobile, and bigger. So comparatively to the 3 big 5-finger gloves that have come out, Pro Gauntlets, Infinity gloves, and these, we see that Pro Gauntlets and Infinity gloves do have a bigger, chunkier frame. So there's often types of side swords that just don't quite fit, whereas this fits into anything that my hand can fit into, because it is near the size of my hand. It's just 1 finger bigger, which so is my leather glove. So it is great that now there is a glove that I can bring that will do 90% of the other weapons, But if you're someone who really just does longsword, you should just be looking at mittens or pro gauntlets. These aren't really the glove for you if you're just doing longsword and you do high impact longsword. For me, for longsword fencing, what I plan to use at my next tournament is going to be a sparring glove and a weapon master on the left. This allows me to get that full protection on the hand that's going to be getting hit the most, and most importantly, I get my unrestricted thumb movement. Nothing beats a sparring glove thumb yet. This is great because sparring gloves aren't the greatest on the pommel side. Right now, my ring finger isn't even touching anything, which is a bit of an issue. It just means you're not getting that full feel of the sword, not getting full power with each finger. And that's what's great about this, is each finger can touch and I can decide how to move the fingers. I can also hold in different positions on the pommel as I thrust, whereas when I want to do that with my sparring glove, I end up in all these weirder wrist positions, which usually, once you watch sparring in slow motion, that's when you can see them. You end up not thrusting like this, you're thrusting like that, in weirder positions. This doesn't happen anywhere near as much because you have the freedom to move that hand and all those fingers where you want on the pommel. So nothing beats the sparring glove yet. All my fingers are together just like a real hand. I can hold in a handshake grip. My thumb is nice and tucked behind the cross guard, and I have that motion with it. And here I finally get a glove that is protective. I'm not worried about any fingers breaking, and I have that mobility on the pommel. So, comment any questions below. Thanks for watching. Keep studying, keep practicing. I did also get the forearm guards with them. They are definitely way too light for AP light jackets. These, you pretty much feel every hit like it's on your skin. These aren't rigid pieces of foam. You can bend this thing in half. You can do whatever you want to it. So for heavier jackets, I think this is great because if you want light forearm guards, so just be aware of that, getting these, that they are extremely light. They're not like one piece of plastic all the way around light forearm guards. Those are the types that I recommend if you're wanting nice fast-paced ones.